one of my biggest mentors, one of my producing partner, and one of my personal heroes. So he has been a huge influence in my life, and you guys will get a very special treat tonight to hear some wonderful stories about this legendary actor who's played so many critically acclaimed roles. And, I will just leave it to Mr. Bruce Dern to tell you about his own career, and you guys are in for a very special treat. So I'm glad you're all here. Mr. Bruce Dern.
Thank you, folks. Is this on so you can hear me? Nice. It's on? It's on? You can hear me? Oh, okay. Nods would have worked, but that's fine. The first thing I wanted to say is only because of the collection of all of you in the room. In my career, I have always felt that the most best bet on having something to make money in the movie industry is something you guys, and if you're not in the movie festival, you're in music or you're in books or wherever you all come from in terms of festivals. But I have always felt that the wealthiest thing that anybody has, the richest thing anybody has, is a finished but not released motion picture, because you never know. And if it wasn't for festivals, you guys put it on, whether it's music and what he did or the other people have done throughout the country with any kind of music festivals they have in Europe, whether it's Venice or whether it's Cannes or all the different places like that. The unreleased motion picture is gold. And if you don't believe me, just ask the people that made the first Blair Witch Project. Because no one heard of it, no one knew of it, no one wants to know of it, but it made $480 million and it cost $47,000. And it's just a bunch of high school kids in New Jersey got together and did that. So I just want to congratulate you on doing what you're doing. Story-wise, I got a bunch of different kind of stories, and I got a little card that I'll look to. It just gives me a headline. But the first story I have is my first day in Hollywood. I started out my career under contract to Mr. Kazan, and he had 5 of us in 1958, 59. Rip Torn, Bruce Dern, Pat Hingle, Geraldine Page, and Lee Remick. And I was kind of the baby of the group, although Lee Remick was just maybe a couple years older than me. But we were the people he paid SAG minimum to, which then was $325 a week. 52 weeks a year, whether we worked or we didn't work. When we did work, and I came to Hollywood and started to make more than $45 a week off Broadway, doing an original play with my ex-wife Diane Ladd called Orpheus Descending, which was Tennessee Williams' play, and we did it off Broadway before it went on to become, later they made a movie called The Fugitive Kind of that play with Marlon Brando and Anna Magnani and I think Joanne Woodward was the girl in it. But anyway, I'm sent to Hollywood to do a movie called Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte, which starred Bette Davis, and the first morning I was there, Miss Joan Crawford. I walk on the set about 9:30 in the morning, and I hear nothing. I see Miss Davis in her chair like this, and I hear nothing but screaming from way back in the back where the woman's dressing room trailer was. And it is very offensive language, but I can just say, without going as harshly as I could go, you tell that bitch that when she decides to treat me like a professional and not dumping on me like she's done for 27 years, and particularly 2 years ago because they had just done whatever happened to Baby Jane, a year before then. So this was like a repeat of that, and they hated each other then, and now they hated each other today. And then Miss Davis shouted out back, way to the back, so that she could hear it in her dressing room, which was on the stage. You tell her, when she is on time and not in her room, having the sores on her back tended to, which she's gotten over 27 years of how she got a career. Now, the other one comes flying out of her dressing room and leaves the set. She says, I quit, I won't do it anymore, I can't do it anymore. She's a bitch from hell. And so she left. We were all dismissed because she was in the shots with us. The next day, they said, be here at 11, we'll take a late call. I came to work the next day at 11. This is my second day now in Hollywood itself, so I knew none of this. I'm just Brucey from Winnetka, you know what I mean? I don't know who the people are. And so she says, I come in, and Bob Aldrich was the director, and he said, you ready to go, Bruce? I said, yeah. He said, we're fine. So I go over to sit, and Miss Davis patted my chair because she knew I was from Mr. Kazan, and so therefore she was a big fan of mine, just figuring I'd been touched by his expertise or magic, whatever it was. And she said, you sit here next to me. So I sat down. And on the other side of Miss Davis was Miss Crawford's chair with somebody in it. Joan Crawford walked through the door, walked onto the set, having quit the movie, having been fired about 11 o'clock that night, and comes on and she says, oh, Bob, I'm so sorry for the way that I performed yesterday, you know, and did this horrible thing. I mean, I can't get along with a woman. I don't trust her. There's nothing I can do with her, you know, ever again, but I was unprofessional, and I will pull my oar. And as she said that, she said, Bob, and I put a comb through my hair in the limousine coming here, and I'm all set to go. Let me just put lipstick on, and I'm ready to shoot. And when she said that, she walked over toward me and saw Miss Davis and saw the woman next to her. And she said, why, Livy, Olivia de Havilland, what are you doing here? Betty Davis sat just like this, with a Chesterfield to the nub, 5 packs a day. John Wayne, 4 packs a day. 5 packs a day. She got one right down to the nub. It's 9:20 in the morning, like that. So somebody, you got a camera. So just say to me, you be Miss Crawford, and you say to me, you say to her, what are you doing here, Livy? She's playing your role, cunt. The second thing is, the first movie I did was a movie called Wild River for Mr. Kazan, and it was done in 58, came out in 1960. No, it was done in 59. Came out in 1960. It starred Montgomery Clift, Lee Remick, and Jo Van Fleet, who was an older actress, played a 90-year-old woman, and she was 32. And they were the stars of the movie. So Kazan, I went up to him and I said something. I said, like, in this scene, this is what I'd like to do. He grabbed me by my shirt like this, and he says, let me tell you something, Bruce. You got a lot to learn. Never in your entire career do you go up to a director and tell them what you're going to do in the shot. And I said, but how do I get away with that? He said, very simply, because he has something you don't have. I said, what the hell is that? Take 2. So be his guest and then, you know, screw it up and then go on. But anyway, that's who Mr. Kazan was. Then the cruelest thing I saw done in my history in the business was we were doing a movie called Family Plot for Mr. Hitchcock. And Barbara Harris was my partner, and then Karen Black and William Devane were the other partner chasing us in Family Plot. And a girl who was the wife of a very famous, powerful executive at Universal came into Hitchcock's office on a Thursday night. We were going to shoot in Bullock's, Wilshire, which is the last great Frank Lloyd Wright design department store in the world now, I guess, but it was on Wilshire downtown. And she walked into his office at 4:30, and she said, "Hitch," went right by the secretary, and she said, "Hitch," because she was wife of the honcho. "Hitch, I got a favor to ask." He said, "What did you say, madam?" She said, "I said, Hitch." "No, not to you. Mr. Hitchcock, to you." She said, "I have a friend named Mary. Mr. Dern has a scene tomorrow in Bullock's, Wilshire with a girl who's a saleswoman in the bra department." The scene was in the bra department. "And she'd be perfect for the role. I know it's just a morning's work," and so forth and so on. "But she has to have money because once a year she has to work on her SAG card to be eligible for her insurance." He said, "Out of the question. Out of the question. Go." So she left. The next morning I come to the set. Hitch is in his chair. I sit in my chair. And a girl comes up to Mr. Hitchcock and says, "I want to thank you so much for doing what you did for me and putting me in this film. It was really great. I really appreciate it." Her name was Mary. And he said, "That's quite all right, Mary. Are you prepared?" She said, "Yes, sir, I know my thing." He says, "Well, in this shot, it'll be over Bruce's shoulder, moving in for a master of the scene, and then we'll turn around and do his coverage, and that's the scene. Have you got that?" He says, "Yes, sir." "All right, go ahead." So he goes ahead. She goes behind the thing. He yells action. We do the scene. She does fine. And he gets up out of his chair, which was, he sat in the small director's chairs, not the big tall ones like this. And when he gets up, he is so big in the waist, the chair comes with him because his waist is sticking out the armholes of the chair. And he turns to me. He was sitting west of me. Didn't even turn because his neck was so big he couldn't do like that. He just talked forward to everybody. He said, "A hand, please, Bruce." So as he walked away from me, I got up, grabbed the legs of the chair, and pulled them off his butt. And then he proceeded to go to the camera, open the camera magazine door, take a piece of the film, pull it out, pull the other end of the film out, and rip it up, and then hold it to a little light that was about as far away as that was, but held it up like this so everybody could see it. And he could see it. And he said, "Oh, my God, Mary." And Mary, the actress, is standing right up. What is it, Mr. Hitchcock? What's the matter? What's the matter? He said, "Look, Mary, you're not photogenic." And she said, "What do you mean? Your picture doesn't appear on the film." Sobbing, crying, she fled from the theater. Hitch went back, sat in his chair. I sat down next to him. I said, "What was that?" And he said, "Don't fuck with Hitch." She went over his head, got her friend on the set in the movie, and he said, "Okay, I'll go along. I'll do what they said." She's history now. And 10 minutes later, Kathleen Nesbitt was in the chair, who was a dame from England and happened to be a great older actress playing the part. So that was Mr. Hitchcock. Another thing, although I was going to say it later, I'll say it now. He did the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen on a movie set in my career. At the end of the first day of shooting on Family Plot, he turned to the first assistant and he said, "All right, Howard, that's a wrap for today. However, I wonder if I might say a few words to my crew." And Howard said, "Sure, go ahead." And he stood up out of his chair, which he didn't need help that time because he wasn't in it as firmly. And he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all for a fabulous first day." And proceeded to walk around the set and thank 72 crew members on the very first day of a film by their first name. Unbelievable. And people say, well, does he really come to work? I heard he was so, oh, please. He was there every day. And just two other quick Hitchcock things that he said. The first day Karen Black worked in the movie, Karen Black had to come in, do a scene, and she said, thank you for having me, Mr. Hitchcock, and so forth and so on, believe him, blah, blah, blah. And he said, that's fine, Karen, you understand the scene, yes. She's in the kitchen, she has to walk around the kitchen, open and close 7 cupboard drawers. I mean, doors up on the wall. And she says, yes. So she goes, camera, action, does it. That's fine, Karen, thank you, that's a print. Now, boys, we're over here, meaning they were going to leave that set and go to another set because she had no dialogue or anything. She raises her hand, Karen Black, like she's in the 4th grade. And she said, Mr. Hitchcock, what is it, Karen? She said, it's my first day, I'm a little intimidated, I'd like another. And he said, why? And she said, because I think I can do it maybe a little better or anything like that. Proceed. Go to your mark. She went to her mark, and he said, go. And she went and did it exactly the same way. No better, no worse. But it was fine. It was fine the first time. And he got up and he said, all right, gentlemen, now we're over here. And Karen goes right up to him, as close as I am to her, and says, but Mr. Hitchcock, you never turned the camera on. That's right, Karen, because I have the one I want. And the last Spielberg, I'll tell you, it's a Spielberg story. When we were shooting Family Plot, Stephen used to come and hover at the back of the set. This is about 11 months after Jaws had opened. So he was now an entity, particularly at Universal where we were shooting. And he used to sit in the back, and Hitch would, because he couldn't turn around, he saw that he was there. He says, who's the boy hovering in the back? I said, that's Steven Spielberg. He just wants 3 minutes to sit at your feet and tell you what you've meant to his life and his career. So could you please just give us that? And he said, no. And he started shaking and sweating. And he said, I can't. I couldn't even shake his hand because he makes me feel like such a whore. And I said, what are you talking about? He said 2 months ago, Lou Wasserman, who ran the whole place, called me up and asked me if I wanted to make $2 million in 20 minutes. And he said, I'm British, but I'm not dumb. So I took it. And it's because of him. Because I took the $2 million when they opened the theme park with the Jaws ride to be the voice asking you to come ride the Jaws ride. And that made him feel like such a whore. So he never met Stephen in his life. And every time I tell Stephen the story, he gets goosebumps. He can't believe that he would use that as thing. But that's who Hitchcock was. He had just amazing personality. He was terrified of anybody in uniform, soldier, police, particularly policemen. Because when he lived in London and he was making, I think he was making Rear Window. And his sister came to visit them, he and Alma, who was his wife, for about 2.5 months during the shooting of the movie. And in London, when you leave your flat for 2.5 months, squatters can come in and live there if you don't live in it. And they don't have to pay rent or anything. They're just there because it's abandoned. Well, she was one of those people. And he said it was the uniformed ones that came to get her, Bruce. So that's why I hated uniformed people. Anyway, another thing. These are all kind of personal reminiscences, so when you're bored, you're pleased to leave or yawn or whatever. Alexander Payne, who directed the movie I did in Nebraska, also directed his first movie he ever made starred my daughter Laura, which was called Citizen Ruth. And Laura was the star of that. And that was 16 years before we did Nebraska. But the first day on the set, he asked me in Shithook, Nebraska, whatever town it was, but small. Wendy, who was my assistant at the time, we had to drive 2 hours in the morning in that killer November, December Nebraska fog. It's on the highway where you can't see if the plows are coming at you or what they are. And we do that every day. So we were in this little town. And he came before me about 8 in the morning. He says, "Do you see anything on the set today that you've never seen in your career before?" I said, "You know something, Alexander, I do. I see everybody seems to be pulling their oar at 8 o'clock in the morning." He said, "Well, hopefully that's because we have a crew of 90 people, and 61 of them have worked every day on every film I've ever made. And so we've got your back." And this is Faden Papamichael, who was the cameraman. And he said, "Faden and I were wondering if we might ask you to do something we're not sure you've ever done in your career." And I said, "Well, what would that be?" He said, "Let us do our jobs." I said, "Meaning?" He said, "Meaning, don't ever show us anything. Let us find it." I knew for the first time in my life I had a partner as my director, because he was saying to me, "I don't need you to act, I just need you to be Woody." Of course it's acting. And when Al Pacino saw the movie, I'd never met him in my life, he called me up the next morning after seeing it on the phone. Now, he got my number, I don't know, he's welcome to it, but he called me on the phone. He says, "Bruce?" "Yes, sir." He says, "It's Al." "Yeah, I recognize the voice." He said, "One question, how did you do that?" And I told him what Alexander told me. He said, "Never in my career has anybody said something like that to me." Because what they're basically saying is, trust. I cast you because I think you're the guy. Be the guy. Don't act. Don't show it to me. We'll be there with the camera. We'll find it. And there's 2 or 3 scenes early in the movie where you see that, where I come into a kitchen and they're arguing, my wife and Will Forte are arguing about something, about a roast or something like that, and I just take a drink of water and I go in the other room and I sit down. Camera follows me. They play an entire scene in the kitchen of a page and a half off camera. The camera is just on me. Because in the scene, they're saying, "I don't know what the sumbitch ever wanted to do with $1 million. He never worked for it, that's for sure. What the hell? I mean, if I had $1 million, I'd put him in a goddamn home. That's what I'd do with him." And I'm there, not, as you find out during the movie, I'm not really listening to anything they're saying, but the camera was on me. That's Alexander Payne. And he and this guy is supposed to show up later on to give me an award or something, Quentin. Today, I will say in front of everybody, for my money, they're the best 2 going today. And to be able to go from Alexander Payne to Quentin Tarantino in The Hateful Eight was pretty lucky for me, because Quentin is a show in himself, as you'll see when he comes. But I mean, he is a show. But he's also a director who just gets it. And both are movie buffs, but in a whole different arrangement from what other directors are. And both are, because what you don't see a lot on movie sets today and in the music world, I'm sure you don't see as much as that I don't see hardly at all, they're about respect for what went before. They know who, why, what, where, and what made them become who they were. When I first came to Hollywood, we had one thing in the 1960s, say, in 61, that we didn't come to Hollywood for it, but we got very lucky, because we were at the right time to still get a chance to work with the legends. We are not legends. They give us awards today and lifetime achievement and this and that and the other thing, but we're not legends. You can't be a legend today. There's too much people that know. I know I have someone here listening today is going to hate when I say this, but it's because everyone knows what we do after school, and they didn't know anything they did any time except when they were on a set. They were protected because they had the studio system, and nobody knew that Gable rode a motorcycle 85 miles an hour, and this one drank, and this one did this and that. Nowadays, it's impossible. The closest thing I think we have to a legend is probably Clint Eastwood, because he looks good on a horse. And he's done what Redford has done. He's put his money where his mouth was. Redford dreamed Sundance, Clint dreamed Carmel. And he and Merv Griffin made Carmel what it is. Every Thanksgiving, people travel up there. Well, this is every week of the year, I'm sure. But anyway, that is who Alexander did, what he was like for me. Another thing is Jack Nicholson, who is, I would say, my dearest friend since 1962. It was when I first met him here in Hollywood. He did the most incredible personal, private thing for me that I've ever had done in my career. We were doing a movie called The King of Marvin Gardens, and it was Jack Nicholson, myself, and Ellen Burstyn, all at 36, 37 years old, in Atlantic City. And it was a movie about trying to build the American dream and building casinos. This is before any casino was thought of or anything else. And putting on a fake Miss America pageant and everything. It was really about the end of the American dream. But we put the pageant on in the empty convention hall with just the young girl who we made Miss Hawaii, Jack, myself, and Ellen playing the organ. At the end of the scene, we crowned this, Julie Robinson was the girl, Miss Hawaii, and she comes down. There's nobody else in the place. It seats 28,000 people. It's an empty cavern. And there's one guy that I hired, my character hired the guy to put this show on, that ran a light. And after they said, Jack sings, here she comes, Miss Hawaii, Miss America. The guy on the light flips the light off, and he said, that's okay, Jason. You ain't paying no time and a half, so get the fuck out of my convention hall. So we turned to go. I'm in a golf cart, a little two-character golf cart with a back seat on it. And Jack is driving it, and I'm sitting in the passenger thing. I mean, I'm driving, and Jack's in the passenger seat. And Ellen couldn't catch up with the little go-kart fast enough, so she ran. She finally got hold of it, and we were going maybe 2 miles an hour. And I was really slow. I was just eking along, you know. But she caught onto it, and she jumped on the back, and she fell off. And Jack took his hand and put it on my leg. And he said, are you all right? He was more concerned about the perpetrator than he was about the victim. And I was his friend. And that's what friendship means to me. A commitment, and that's who Jack Nicholson is. And I'm not here to glorify him. He's got enough of that. But that was as classy an act as I've ever seen anybody do for me in my career. Going back to Mr. Kazan for a second, he showed me the greatest respect for the American theater and American cinema that I have ever seen or heard of in my life. My first play was an Actors Studio production, because I was also a member of the Actors Studio, and which he helped run with Lee Strasberg and a lady named Cheryl Crawford. And we were doing a play, a Sean O'Casey play called Shadow of a Gunman. And Mrs. O'Casey was coming all the way from Ireland. He was passed away, to be at the play, and all the biggies in New York were there and had paid money for the opening night, because they wanted to see frankly, what the Actors Studio meant and what it was up to, that now they felt their work should be seen by the theater, by everybody, a paying audience. It wasn't a workshop or anything, it was a theater. And every night before the play at 7:20, I would go out and sit in the alley where the big limos pull up or the cars pull up with actors at the stage door. And each night, when I would sit there, a huge limousine would drive up. I mean huge. It could have been a 10-passenger one or 8-passenger one. Out of the very last door, a man about 6'7", huge, walked out with a pink poodle in each arm and walked into the stage door of the theater. On the other side, a little tiny lady no more than 5 feet to 5'1" got out with a little kind of a gown on and a pink poodle in each arm. And she walked into the theater. About the fourth night I sat there, just before we opened, 2 nights before we opened, Gadge, I mean, Mr. Kazan, we called him Gadge. But Mr. Kazan came out and he said, "What the hell are you doing out here?" I said, "What's my favorite thing in life? I know your favorite thing is opera." "Well, I can't sit through a goddamn opera, never have and never will. But life has opera in it. For example, the opening of the Olympic Games, that's opera, because everybody's there. And they're not trying to make a difference, they're just trying to do what they do, but it's opera. When we all stand at a sporting event and sing the anthem, that's opera." So he knew I said, "Be here tomorrow night at 7:20 and don't be late and you'll see opera." He says, "Oh, for Christ's sake, if you think I'm going to come here at 7:20 to see your version of what opera is, you're nuts. And I don't know why I have you under contract." I said, "Be here." The next night he comes at 7:20. The big limousine pulls up. The same thing happens. The big man gets out. The little lady gets out with the 2 poodles. And I turn to him, and tears are streaming down his face. And he said, "You know, Bruce, I'm just a landed Jewish, Turkish immigrant from Istanbul who got off the boat at Ellis Island when I was 6 years old. And I will never," and he started crying, so much so I had to put my hands on his shoulders. And he pointed to the doorway, and he said, "No matter what success you all think I have and everything, I will never, ever be part of that. Because that, young man, is the American theater." Because that was Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontaine. And he knew they were on a different level than he was, only because remnants of things past. And they were doing a play called The Visit, which then Ingrid Bergman did, I think, with Anthony Quinn as a movie. But that was that story. And that endeared me to me. I know about the blacklisting and I know everything else, but at the same time, I judged the man by what I saw and what I worked. And I had an uncle named Archibald MacLeish, and Kazan directed a play that he wrote called JB on Broadway. And my Uncle Archie won 5 Pulitzer Prizes as a poet and a playwright, and he was Librarian of Congress for 18 years, and was big stuff. And he's the guy that said, some wag came up to him after his first Pulitzer Prize and said, "Mr. MacLeish, I just don't sure I understand what your poems mean." And he said, "Wag." Called him a wag right away. Journalists love that. He says, "Wag, a poem must not mean, it must be." And that's his famous quote, and I teach it in every English class in America. And he ended up being the Boylston professor at Harvard his last 35 years or something. But he was, anyway, he was big stuff. But let's see now, what do we have here? I did an episode of a TV show called Big Valley. And Big Valley was on all during the 60s. And it starred Barbara Stanwyck. And Lee Majors was the first time anybody ever saw him. And Richard Long. And that real beautiful girl from Hollywood High School, Linda Evans. She was the girl in it. And the third guy, I forget his name right now, but they were a family. And I was a guest star in some episode where obviously I played a guy who had escaped from prison and come to work for them on their farm. And, everybody thinks I'm a bad guy, but I end up kind of helping. So the third or fourth day of work, I come to work, and Barbara Stanwyck is sitting in her chair, just like this. No tears in her eyes, no tears, just stern, like I've never seen. And she was very pretty in the beginning. I mean, black and white did a lot for these actresses, believe me. But she just looked very, very stern. And I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "Most women would be crying, but my husband left me last night. And what pisses me off, Bruce, is he didn't take anything but his shirts. 167 shirts to marry some German girl who he had been with. Christine Kaufman was her name, but who he had been with. And I just hated it." The actor's name was Robert Taylor, who was maybe one of the 5 biggest leading men in the history of movies in the 40s and 50s. Great-looking guy, a black-haired guy. Anyway, so that was her little insight into my life. Another one that freaked me out has to do with film festivals. Last year, they had my partner was up here, Wendy, and a lot of other women and so forth and so on, put on a film festival called the Bentonville Film Festival. It's in Bentonville, Arkansas. Why in Bentonville? Everybody says, "God, what the hell's Bentonville?" Well, that's where Walmart is, and Walmart is the partner of the festival. So we were there, and backstage after the night when we all get introduced, we had myself, Big Rob Gronkowski, the tight end for, up in New England, and Nick Cannon, who's on the board also, who's the guy that introduces whatever that show is, where he's the host on Think You Can Dance, or I don't know. Yeah, America's Got Talent, right. And myself and Wendy and a magician. And I always forgot I had to ask Wendy, and his name is Flaum, F-L-A-U-M. He's a Las Vegas magician. So he turns to Bob Gronkowski, who's 6'6" and weighs 280 and moves like a cat. And he says, "Mr. Gronkowski, sir, have you got a dollar bill?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "Hand it to me." He looks at it. He says, "What's your birthday?" And Rob says, "I don't know, May 1st, 1960 or 1972, something like that." He said, "May 1st, 1972. Okay. He takes the dollar bill and he crumbles it up in this hand, like this, to a little balled up, tight wad. And he says, "Touch my hand." And Rob Gronkowski said, "Wait a second. What, I'm not going to get electrocuted or something. If I touch your hand, what's going to happen? Nothing. All that's in it is your dollar bill." He touched his hand. Wendy and the other people who were there will tell you, nothing. Another hand never moved. He never did anything like that. He opened it. He gave Rob the crumbled up dollar bill. Rob opened it and read the serial number on the bill, which was his birthday. To anybody that gave him a bill, same thing. Your birthday, once he tells you what it is, will be the serial number on the bill and not the real serial number. So I figured that was kind of magical to come out of a festival in his first year. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of times you'll find it's the periphery stuff around festivals that also make people remember forever what they saw. Just imagine what this man put on a stage at Woodstock. You know, my God, 2 days of rain and rest, who knows what. But there certainly weren't a lot of porta potties. But I mean, it's just remarkable what the people do. Another little short story is, when we were doing The King of Marvin Gardens, Bob Rafelson was the director, and he had directed Jack Nicholson, who was my partner in the movie, as I said earlier, in 5 Easy Pieces. He had also contributed to the script in Easy Rider, and he and his partner, who was Bert Schneider's father was president and chairman of the board of Columbia Pictures. They went into the father's office and they said, "Dad," this was 4 years earlier, "we want to take 4 kids no one's ever heard of, put them on television and put them over on America as a band." The Monkees. That was their idea. And I think Peter Tork was a very valid musician, but I don't know that the other 3 were. And so they put them on television, they were a hit. When it was done, they said, "We want to make a movie." So they made a movie which Bob Rafelson directed called Head, which was a movie that they were in, that all the kids were in, on a back lot of a movie studio. And so we're doing a scene in Marvin Gardens where Jack and I tell each other we love each other. I tell him, and he just kind of pats me on the shoulder as my arms are around him. He can't really look me in the eye and say anything to me. So we do it. It's 7 minutes long, the scene. Just 2 people in a bedroom at night, standing up. I walked to him. And Rafelson said, "Okay, that was good. I'd like to do it again." Okay. Now, Jack had been down the road with Curly Bob. I had never been down the road as a director. I'd worked for a producer in television, but never as a director. Finally, after take 9, we both said, "What do you want, Curly? I mean, what are you looking for? You don't have it 9, you're worse than Ashby." Hal Ashby is another guy who went takes and takes. And so he would say, he put his arm up like this, rolled his sweater up, and he says, "What do you see?" And we just saw an arm, bare, from here to there. And we say, "It's a bare arm." He said, "No, goosebumps. I wanted to see goosebumps on my arm." Take 24. He prints. He rips his sleeve up, and Jack and I are just now, "Yeah, Curly, what now? How many more you want to go?" He said, "No, that's it." He rolls the sleeve up, and Jack says, "So, what's there?" He says, "What do you see?" And Jack says, "I just see a big hairy arm." And I said, "I don't see anything. Do you see goosebumps?" "Yeah, but what's the significance?" 15 million on opening weekend. Let me see. It's just that I've told a lot of stories through all the years, and I don't like to repeat any of the John Wayne stuff from the Cowboys because everybody's heard it forever and ever. But there is one story they've never heard. When they went to cast, The Cowboys was a movie with John Wayne as the head trail boss and me as the bad guy who's chasing after him. And 10 little kids, boys, from the one-room schoolhouse, age 6 to 16. And they're there, and they have to be drive the cattle 2,000 miles to Belfouche, South Dakota from East Texas, and have them there by what we would call Labor Day now. And this was on Memorial Day. And the herd was about 500 head of cattle. So he picked all 9 boys, and Bobby Carradine was one of the kids, a kid named A. Martinez, another kid, Norman Howell, who was a famous stuntman now, maybe one of the most famous, was just a cowboy kid then. And he doubled Laura in Jurassic Park. So that tells you how versatile he could be, you know. And so, anyway, there's one little kid at the end of the line standing next to his dad. His name is Clay O'Brien. And he stepped forward when the casting was done. He says, well, I get 9. I got an idea who I want as a 10th, but he's flying in from Hollywood. And this little Clay O'Brien stands up, and he was big enough so that in the movie they take a 10-gallon hat and drop it over him, and the hat just moves. You can't see there's a body under it. That's how small he was. So they had done that later on, but not then. And he said, you didn't pick me. He says, no, son, I didn't pick you. You're too small. And the little kid at 6 said, I can drop you with a rope, you big son of a bitch. And John Wayne laughed, that big guffaw, and looked down, and he says, oh, yeah, well, that's fine, Sonny. And turned around to dismiss and go. That ceremony was over. The kid says, Dad, give me a rope. The dad gives him a rope. He twirls it 3 times, wanes as far as that black-haired girl right there in the chair, right around his boots, and dropped him on his butt. And walked over to him and stood over him. He said, you see what I can't do? Anyway, that kid was Clay O'Brien. His father was Gene O'Brien. Clay O'Brien went in to be 9-time world champion all-around cowboy, all through the 90s and into the early 2000s. His father was Gene O'Brien, who was a famous rodeo team roper. And the thing that made Gene so famous was he was left-handed. And team roping's almost impossible as a left-handed person. But they were a team. So Gene really kicked the nuts out of the kid, later on. But he was... The neatest thing about, when I said we still got to work with the legends, I think every one of us in our generation, and my generation, I'm talking about Clint and Burt Reynolds and Jack and Robert Redford and Warren Beatty and a big star when we were young named Gardner McKay. And we were the age group after Paul Newman and Steve McQueen and them, so to speak. And every one of the famous people I worked for or worked with always encouraged me to go out on the edge and take risks, because that whole generation realized in us, and this is from actresses too. Gina Rowlands will tell you the same thing that she was told by Lauren Bacall. And Lauren Bacall was like 17, and Gina Rowlands was or 20 then, and Gina Rowlands was like 17. Take risks. Don't be afraid to do shit that hasn't been done, because we were never given the freedom to try and do that, nor did anybody understand it was about human beings. It wasn't about how good an actor you were. It was about, can you make us believe you are the characters? And my generation was lucky to have been able to work with these people that encouraged us to do that, because we were like early actor studio members, or we were used to doing things through what they call the method, which is you start inside. You start from your heart, and you build out. Will Forte in Nebraska, the first day in the car, said to me, what am I doing here? I don't understand. What am I doing here? I said, because Alexander put you here. He said, yeah, but why? I'm Will Forte. I made a movie called MacGruber. I had celery sticking out my ass when I ran down the street. I've been on 12 years on Saturday Night Live. I said, it's not Saturday Night Live here, bud. It's just you. You made a tape for him, and he believed you. Be the guy you are. He said, but nobody's interested in me. No, but they might be interested in my son in this movie, if you embrace that and just get that. And when you look at Alexander's movie, same as Quentin movie, he uses a lot of the same people again and again. And that's basically because they don't let him down. They come through. And I must say, for me, he did the most wonderful thing I guess I've ever had done in my career. And that was, in The Hateful Eight, I felt panicked in Telluride. We were there December, January, and February, trapped. It's 8,800 feet. We were shooting at 10,200 feet. Couldn't get our breath. Last story. Is that what you heard?
The most unpopular person in the room right now. But unfortunately, this is the last story because he's going to be speaking again.
Oh, okay.
At the
Okay. So anyway, what happened was he gave me a chair. I sat in the chair in the house that we were shooting in. I mean, that they built for us, that cabin. I don't know if you saw the Hateful Eight, but it was the highest it ever got was 27 degrees above zero. The lowest it got was like when Wendy and I would get there in the morning, it was 7 below zero. And the first problem was a lot of people had long speeches, and you couldn't make them because you couldn't get your breath. You couldn't get through. You know, you'd say, well, so far and so on, but it's 10,000, it's 2 miles in the air. You just can't, so we had to move back to Hollywood. Well, when we moved back to Hollywood, they disassembled that cabin, brought it all the way to Hollywood, put it on a sound stage, and we did the last 6 weeks on a sound stage. And what did the pricks do? They refrigerated the stage to 25 degrees. So we'd be sitting on a day like today or in a Santa Ana, and then we'd go outside and sit in that and then go back in and cough our lungs out because it was just, but one of the producers is here today, Shannon McIntosh, who was one of the producers of, stand up and let them see who you are. She produced The Hateful Eight, and she's got major game. And the other person outside of Wendy that I want to give a shout out to is my assistant, Lisa Klein, who's sitting back there, who's probably heard these stories so many times she's got bed sores. But I can only say that her intuition into everything gets me through the day. She just flat out gets it on every level. And as good as Wendy was, and Wendy was great, particularly on locations. Wendy just has a way. And Wendy and I used to play a little game that Wendy's mom and brother are here today. And I don't know if they've ever known that Wendy played a little game, but Wendy has never really been in a marital situation, man and woman. And we have a saying, and the saying is, my criteria, GB, which he calls me, for judging a guy is, can he fill a doorway? Well, we're in a hotel where Fest Parker built it. Fest Parker could fill a doorway, you know. And the other guy, and Clint could fill a doorway, and a lot of people can fill a doorway, but that was Wendy's criteria. So just know who she is, know who the other people are, and just know that even this woman who just quit being a lawyer, which will tell you something, I really appreciate what you've all done in being here and showing up to listen to this shit.